This is Steph Lee, founder of Host Agency Reviews, and this is our first episode of the Friday 15 in the new year. So welcome. And today we have our co-host, a new co-host who we have never had on before. So let me introduce Scott Wismont of Rainbow Getaways. He's the owner. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Hello, I am fantastic. I can't believe that we are already through the first week of 2024. If this week is any indication of the way the year is going to go, we're done already.
I hear you. It's hard for me to believe that we're already in the first week in January and that like host week is coming up, which is our
Yeah.
big event. I'm like, we have so much to do before that.
It'll come through. It'll all come
Yes.
through.
Well, a couple things about Host Week. So, for those of you listening, if you haven't registered already, you can register for free by going to hostagencyreviews.com/Host Week. Scott will be doing a presentation there too, as well. So you can tune in to learn a little bit more about that. But the other thing I wanted to go over before we jump into our questions is I was looking at our reviews for last year, and we haven't gotten any new reviews. So if you have time and if you're loving the Friday 15, please go ahead and give it a review, rate and review on whatever platform you're on for your podcast. We would greatly appreciate it, as if there's not enough things to do already in January as wave season comes crashing into us. So let's see. Scott, our first question comes in from Kate, and Kate is asking, my questions have to do with me considering doing it part-time for retirement. From what I have already watched, it appears that most host agencies and consortia, still learning the lingo, frown on that. Please correct me if this is wrong. I don't want to waste anyone's time if that is the case. Also, if that is the case, should I lean more towards a travel club or similar? I have been looking into some MLMs and I'm not interested in selling memberships. I would greatly appreciate your feedback and thoughts whenever you have time to respond. So we have time right now, Kate.
Yes.
Scott, what are your thoughts on this? Because you're with Ensemble, right, for your consortium?
Yeah, so I joined Ensemble shortly after going independent a couple of years ago, and the great thing about being an independent contractor is you get to set your hours.
Mm-hmm.
So as an IC, you can work part-time, you can work full-time, but the trade-off is how much time you put into it is really going to determine how much you get out of it. So as the host agency reviews independent and hosted advisor reports will tell you.
Scott, stop. You're just like, you're doing an ad for us.
I know I am, right? It's a huge mouthful though. Like as they'll tell you, the more you work in each week, the more you'll get paid out of it because you're getting more clients, you're finding people, you're working with them, you're talking to them, you're making money. So it's a nice little cycle. But that said, it doesn't mean you have to go full-time in order to hit those milestones. Like if you set goals for yourself, which everyone should every year, if you haven't done your 2024 year goals, now's a great week to do it. Give yourself an extra 10-20% over what you did last year. It's a great place to start. Mm-hmm. Anyway, you'll be able to make those goals and you can figure out how much time you need to commit to doing those works or doing those hours. Avoid MLMs, host agencies, and several other websites will tell you which ones are MLMs. Avoid them. They focus on recruiting, downlines, travel clubs, same thing. You're not really selling travel, you're selling a membership. So find a host that works for you. And I would honestly be very hard pressed if anybody ever told me that there's a host out there that requires specific hours, because you're an independent contractor. You're going to make your own schedule.
Yep, exactly. So, Kate, if you haven't seen the reports that Scott was talking about, every year we do our annual survey on travel advisors, and then we do reports on hosted segment, the independently accredited segment, and then the employee. And it's, I think this year it was 2/3 of hosted advisors were full-time, but so there's a significant chunk that are still part-time. And the other thing I want to say, Kate, because Scott and I aren't sure. It sounds like you're relatively new to this. So it's not uncommon for people their first few years to work at it part-time because the amount of income that you're earning, unless you have a partner that you can live off their income, it's very difficult, to live off $15,000 or, $25,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people will continue working their full-time job and then do this on the side until they get enough of that repeat and referral business that they can jump off and go out on their own. So I'm with Scott. If a host agency is telling you that you need to work X amount of hours a week, that is a red flag for them crossing over into the employee line, which you want to be careful of. And so I'm going to put a couple resources in here for you, Kate. One is on MLMs, those multi-level marketing / pyramid schemes / direct sales, whatever they brand themselves. They are selling memberships, and they're frowned on in the industry because read the article and it'll break your heart, essentially. The other thing I am going to link to is those research reports that I was talking about, if you want any more information on those. And then I'm going to put something in for the contracts and like red flags that you want to look for when you're looking for your host agency. So hope that answers the question, Kate. And then next question, Scott, is from Emma W. And this is a big one. So, hi, Steph. First off, thanks to you and the HAR staff for all of the great info you provide to the members of the industry. You are more than welcome, Emma. We love doing it. So my question comes in light of a great interview with Rose Gray of Fox World Travel that I recently listened to, in which she highlighted the benefits of starting your career as an employee agent with an established agency like Fox World Travel versus going the independent agency owner route. So that means being self-employed, I think is what Emma's asking. So I started my agency last spring, but after allowing my time and energy to be zapped by a handful of trying personal issues, I have gotten nowhere fast. Despite having a bachelor's in entrepreneurship and several years working in a very demanding career as a public school teacher, I continue to feel incredibly overwhelmed by the logistics of getting my business off the ground, and I'm wondering if I should have gone the employee route first. Should I abandon ship now and come back to being self-employed when I have some booking experience under my belt? Or should I stick it out and try to find training opportunities that more closely mirror the kind of intensive training you would receive working for an agency? And any training recommendations are welcome. Thanks so much, Emma. So, Scott, great question here. I did find this interview that Emma had listened to. So I'm going to link to that in the comments. But essentially what Rose Gray was saying was it's really nice to have somebody that shows you the ropes when you're an employee. And that is very, very true. So, Scott, what are kind of your thoughts on this? Is it make sense to go the employee route? Should she? Because one thing, Scott and I talked about this beforehand, we aren't sure, Emma, if you are independently accredited, have your own accreditation, or if you're with a host agency, because that can be. Okay, go ahead.
So that's, Emma, this is a great question. But as Steph was saying, there's 3 different ways that I'm not sure if you are independently accredited or if you're with a host that's struggling. So the first thing I do want to point out is joining an employer as a travel agent is beneficial to somebody who's coming into the industry with no professional experience. This is especially great for people coming out of college, somebody who's looking to get into the field but really hasn't worked before. Because when you work for an employer, you can learn the good habits of your time management, replying to emails, customer service skills, like all those things that beginners don't have. And that's what the employer can really help out with. Plus, you get your benefits, you get your steady salary or hourly, you get your bonuses. So there are some really great benefits to being an employee opposed to somebody who owns their own business.
Mm-hmm.
The trade-off, though, and what I warn everybody about is be careful joining a business just to get training only to leave. Especially if you're going to turn into a business owner, you'll appreciate this a lot more. It costs every employer a lot of money to not only onboard, but to find the right person, put them through the interview, run the background checks, go through the onboarding, go through the training. Like you're talking some employers upwards of $100,000 per employee that they hire. So that employer wants them to stick around for years in order to recover the cost and get the benefit of the experience that they just imparted on that person. So just be very careful if you're thinking about joining an employer just with the intent of leaving.
Yeah, because you may be that employer in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, I'm a small business owner. Like, I take time to train everybody. And if somebody comes in and wants to leave right away, if it's not a great fit, it's not a great fit. Understand that. But if it's coming in maliciously just to get training, then that's a problem. And I hope nobody does it to any employers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're starting out as in the industry under a host, you have benefits of that host training program. You can lean on the experience of the leadership team, your peers, if they assign you a mentor. You have your preferred suppliers, which means they have a relationship with those suppliers already. So now you're able to contact them if you're having a problem. You know who to talk to. You probably have contacts within those partners so that you don't have to worry about calling and them not knowing who you are, which that's the biggest risk of if you're just starting out as an independently accredited agency. You don't have any contacts.
Yep.
You are starting out as a nobody, and you have to kind of not only work your way up with your clients, finding the clients, getting them to book, but then also the suppliers. And that's the reason people want to work with a travel advisor, is our relationship with our partners. And if you work with a great host, we've spent the time building out that network, so then you can come in and basically get the benefit of it.
Yeah, exactly. A couple things to add to that, Emma. So with the employee, our employee report actually just came out a few weeks ago. And so to give you some numbers, because what Scott's talking about, like that stable income is really, really nice, and the benefits. So the average annual income for an employee travel advisor in 2022 was 51,727. And there's actually quite a few. It used to be that it was very difficult to get a job at an agency because they were like, you need to have experience. But there's such a dire need in the industry right now. I'll link to our travel jobs board where you can look up some jobs. But there's such a dire need that 31% of the employees that took it were new, which means they had less than 3 years of experience, which is huge. And there's a lot of flexibility now. About half work remotely, which is a huge jump from before the pandemic. And the other thing to know is if you're going the employee route, one of the things to keep in mind is this for $51,000 that I mentioned. That's going to be because there's a couple different compensation routes. So let's see, there's the sales only route, which I wouldn't suggest going. In that case, you could probably go on your own. Although you will get some mentorship, you're not making any money unless you sell anything. Then there's also just the base salary. All you're earning is your salary or your hourly wage. And then there's salary plus commission. And the salary plus commission, if you can get a job like that. So one thing, Emma, I would say, like, if you feel more comfortable, this employee route seems more secure for you, and you want this more structured, like a person there every day with you. One of the things you could do is negotiate as you get experience to have some commission come in to help bump up your salary. But the other thing you could negotiate, Scott was talking about making sure not to leave your employer high and dry, because we are all small business owners, and it really is hard when people take a lot of your time and energy and then go elsewhere, especially if they're starting a competing company. So one of the things you could do is you could negotiate your commission on top of your salary. The other thing is, if you wanted to go independent, know that Scott and I talked about this before, but those clients that you're booking at that agency don't belong to you. They belong to the agency. So you're starting fresh when you go out on your own. But what you could negotiate is, that you're an independent contractor with them. So they're still benefiting from you. And you could stay with them and then negotiate some kind of a commission split or something along those lines. And that way you're not burning any bridge. Because as Scott and I said earlier, travel industry is so small.
Yeah.
So small. We all know each other. Let's see. Okay, next question. Last question today is from Corey W. So, Scott, Corey says, I'm in the process of getting a business bank account, and I recall something being mentioned in one of the Friday 15s or the 7-day setup about potentially setting up a trust account for clients' deposits. Is this just a secondary bank account specifically for depositing clients' deposits, or is it something official that is regulated by the state or another overseeing agency as it is for attorneys? What do you think, Scott?
Well, the official answer is that a true trust account or escrow account, depending on where you're at, is set up by an attorney, and it's a managed account to protect your client's money. There are states with seller travel laws that require this, like California is one of them. If you want the full seller travel, you have to have some form of an account set up to receive money from your clients. Now, I will say most host agencies and most agencies are set up these days as a pass-through agency, which means if I'm booking your trip, you're authorizing me to give your credit card to celebrity or whoever you're going with, and they're the ones that are charging your credit card. So I'm never touching your money. Those trust accounts really come into play when you are receiving money for like group trips or any other reason that like somebody's dropping off a physical check or they're giving you cash. That's when you're going to put it into the trust account to then pay the supplier. One thing I would like to point out is if you're hosted, check with your host to find out what their rules are, because there are a lot of hosts that don't allow you to receive money directly from the client for travel. They should hopefully allow you to receive money for planning fees, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so if your host agency does require that, like say if someone's writing out a check your client, they would have to write it out to the host agency, but that's definitely something to check in with to make sure you're in line with those seller of travel registrations. And if you don't know what those are, no worries, because we have an article on it that is full of wonderful regulations and legalese, very exciting stuff. But we'll put that in there. And Scott, a couple of things, because I mentioned this earlier, but I want to say it again. You are doing your presentation, your Edge Spot for Host Week. And then I know I saw on our events calendar, and I'm going to link to this event as well as the events calendar, but I saw that you're also doing a webinar on February 12th. Do you want to tell a little bit about what that webinar is and what your Edge Spot is?
Yeah, so the Edge Spot, we'll start with that since it's first. It is, I think I just heard today, it's Monday.
Oh, perfect.
I'm up on the first day, so this is fantastic. But it's what's new or what the travel trends are in the LGBTQ travel world for 2024. We'll be talking a little bit about what makes up the community and then what we're looking for in travel. And then fast forwarding to next month, which is hard to say already, February is next month.
Yeah.
I'm going to be going through the differences of working for an LGBTQ owned host for an LGBTQ advisor versus working for a general host that just serves everybody. There are specific differences, and that's really what we're going to dive into to help people make up their minds on who the best host is for them.
That's perfect. We're going to link to, again, the Host Week registration for those of you that aren't. It's the very last week in January. It's a blast if you haven't joined us. And then we'll also link to that webinar for those that are interested. Now, coming up in the future, so January 12th, we have Lindsay Lauer with Travel Leaders 365 is co-hosting. So for any of these co-hosts, if you have questions for them or about their host agency, you can submit them by going to hostagencyreviews.com/Friday15. January 19th, we have April Swales with Uniglobe Travel Center. And then January 26th, we have Christine Hardenberger with Modern Travel Professionals. So let's see. Thank you so much for joining us today, Scott. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on. We hope we can have you on another time this year.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and have a great January in 2024.
Yes. And thank you all for joining us. We will see you next Friday.